Hey guys, welcome back. This is Blue Forest. So I have just completed, fully explored LOC3. This is the final mission that I was yet to fully explore in the game. I had actually been taking my time with it on purpose. I did the first lane, I don't know, maybe a year ago, and then I did several more lanes, but I was kind of holding off on it because I knew that once I was done with it, there wouldn't be anything new left for me to do in the game, especially since the last year or two, there really hasn't been much in the way of new content. And so when they made the announcement that the game was shutting down, I knew that I would have to go ahead and finish it up. I did not want to leave the game having not fully explored this, so I just did the last couple of lanes over the past few days. LOC3 was never my favorite of them. I actually prefer LOC1 and 2. I just thought they were more fun and the mods are interesting and you could use different teams. With LOC3, the fights are just really long. They get kind of tiring and monotonous, and the AI is the most advanced in the game, which makes it challenging, but the AI does a lot of just silly stuff that a human can't do. A lot of blocking specials at the end of combos, being able to attack you when you're attacking them, projectiles going through them. You see lots of that kind of stuff. So it's not that hard. I mean, if you're an experienced player, you can definitely get through it. It is very tiring, and it's just not my favorite. I do feel a real sense of accomplishment having finished it, but it's a different feeling than finishing LOC 1 and 2 for the first time. And I think the main reason I was never totally crazy about LOC3 is just because of the 2-bot rule. I mean, I understand why they did that, but with 2 bots, you can't really have fun with a lot of different bots. You can't really use different teams. Obviously, you're not getting much in the way of synergies. And of course, most people are just using Tronus for most of the fights because he just makes things easier, and you want to conserve, your revives and your resources. But with that said, I'm really happy to have finished it. I can leave the game knowing that I have completed everything. And as you can see, I mean, the rewards are really good. I mean, obviously they're not as meaningful now as they would have been a year ago because the game's shutting down. But, you're getting lots of gold, Titan fragments, a couple 5-star bots, a couple T4 sparks, and the 20 generic 5-star SIGs are really good. So if you're thinking about doing it, if you've already started it and you want to complete it, or you haven't started it, like I said, as long as you're a reasonably good player, you can certainly get through it. And obviously we're getting lots and lots of energon now, so you wouldn't have to worry so much about revives. I would say though, just a couple of tips, obviously use Tronus for every lane. If you're an amazing player and you want to just challenge yourself as much as possible, you could do a few lanes without him, but he really does just make everything easier. He has that huge safety net. And then beyond that, I would use bots that you play really, really well with. And of course, I would say in LOC3, given the length of the fights, given how hard they hit, because the thing about LOC3 is that, there's no mods, which is nice in a way, but, the special 3 is unlocked, so you have to be mindful of power. But the thing about LOC3 compared to 1 and 2 is that the opponent's attack rating is way higher than in LOC 1 and 2. And so they do hit very hard. They can certainly kill you with a single special, that kind of thing. So you have to be focused and you have to concentrate when you do this. And so I just want to go over the map really quickly. Let's just take a quick look at this, and I'll just make a few recommendations. So obviously there's 7 lanes. You get the completion rewards when you do the first lane, whichever one you choose, and then you get the exploration rewards after you finish the final lane. So that's the thing. Once you do the first lane, you're not getting any more rewards until you go through all of it. And so you have the no class lane and then 1 lane for each class. Most people would say that the brawler lane is the easiest, and I would agree with that. I did that first because you just have, you have really tanky bots like Ultra Magnus and Grinder and MV1, but beyond that, it's not that difficult. So if you haven't started it yet, I would recommend trying that lane out first. Try the brawler lane. If you can get through it without too many problems, then you should be fine for the rest. So let's just start with the no class lane. Mirage is definitely the most annoying on that lane just because of the buffs that he gets with his specials, particularly that range buff with the special 1. So the vast majority of people are going to use Prowl just because you want to power control Mirage over and over and over again, because if he does start firing off those special 1s, it's almost impossible to dodge all of those range shots. It makes it a nightmare, and you can try to push him up to a special 2 over and over again, but that's tricky. I do know people that have used Kickback. You can even use Windblade and just use her heavies over and over again to kind of dodge those range shots. But there's no doubt that Prowl will make that fight the easiest. And then Bludgeon's fine. Tronus is a little tricky just because you have to be mindful of his power. But as long as you're baiting out those specials, no big deal. Tac B evades a lot, but not that hard, and Windblade is fine. The Brawler lane, like I said, nothing too difficult. I would actually say Wheeljack was probably the most difficult for me just because, the AI is very advanced, right? And his special 2 always kind of comes out of nowhere, but in LOC3, that Wheeljack, he can really be sneaky with that special 2. But like I said, otherwise, Brawler lane, not very difficult. The Warrior lane is certainly one of the hardest, if not the most difficult, just because you have Scorp in particular is kind of a nightmare, right? So Scorp, he heals constantly, right? Because these are all, I believe, Sig 100 bots. So he's healing over and over and over again, so it makes it quite a long fight. And, of course, he's building up those Venom charges, right? And so even if you're not taking hits, he gets up to 10 Venom charges. If he lands a single heavy on you, or, you can't dodge one of his special 2s, it's just you're in big trouble. I found that fight to be pretty irritating. I think that was one of the only fights I had to revive on several times. Demotron's no big deal. Just remember that he is going to heal at the end, so you're basically going to have to kill him twice. I was worried about Blaster, but he actually turned out to be fine. And Motormaster, he's a little scary towards the end just because, he has all those melee buffs when he's at low health. But I found it to be easier than I expected. Just deal with it unstoppable and be very careful when he is at low health, because if he tags you, he's going to do a ton of damage. Tech lane, not too bad. Prowl and Mixmaster are fine. Soundwave is obviously annoying because he's reflecting constantly, so you have to be very careful of his shield. When that shield is active, you can't be using range shots. Tantrum was fine, and I actually thought Scout B was not that bad. I thought he was going to be crazy annoying because of all the evasion, but it wasn't that hard for me. I did not need any revives against him. And then you have the Scout lane, right? So we're starting with that infamous Bone Crusher fight because, if you are bringing Tronus on that lane, you're not going to have, TC or Grim or somebody. I remember being nervous when I did that Bone Crusher fight, but it was actually not that bad. You just use a lot of range shots, you hit into his block as much as possible, and heal as much as possible. He does obviously, bleed you a lot. You're going to have some bleed on you, but as long as you're not focused on melees, the fight actually isn't too bad. And the rest of the Scout lane is fine, except I was a little bit surprised by Arcee, just because that evade range buff she gets activates constantly. And so if you are using Tronus against her, she's going to be evading that special 2 a lot. So I do think I had to revive against her. And then on the demo lane, there's a couple tricky fights on here. Jetfire is just very annoying, right? Because he's the only bot that can stun you, and he can reflect those range shots, so you have to be careful with looking for openings. And once he drops below 75% health, he's going to start to heal occasionally. So it's an annoying fight, but I didn't think it was too bad. Cheetor I was worried about, but it was actually fine. Just be careful of that Feral Strike, because he does evade a lot, but I thought it was actually a fairly easy fight. Hot Rod was a little tricky just because, remember, with his SIG and with Deceleration, he's going to get that crazy power flow, and he will also evade a fair amount. So if you are using Tronus against him, be careful with that special too, because he is going to evade it sometimes, and just be very mindful of his power because he's going to be gaining lots and lots of power in the fight. Ramjet's easy. Shockwave's fine. Just be very careful of those those energy charges, so he's not landing shock on you. And then the Tactician lane, that's probably the other most difficult lane. Most people would say Tactician and Warrior are the hardest. Galvatron's just super, super fast. You got to be careful with him. And if you do start to lose health, You got to be really mindful of his SIG, because if his SIG starts to activate, he could get up to a special 3 and kill you. Sideswipe was easier than I expected. Just be careful of the agility buff. And then that brings us to Rhinox. And Rhinox sucks. Rhinox is a very, very annoying fight because of his SIG, right? He's going to be landing lots and lots of shock on you. So if you are using Tronus and a Tactician, right, so that means that you don't have a Shock Purifier or a bot like Scout B who's going to be able to break the shields, you're going to get a lot of shock landed on you. And man, that shock is crazy. Just one stack of it is nuts. You can do things like, take off any, crit rate masteries if you're using those. But, you just got to be really, really careful and expect to die. Like I would say Rhinox and Scorp were the only fights I had to revive multiple times on. But then thankfully, once Rhinox is done, Jazz and Demohide, Ironhide are both pretty easy. And then thankfully, Thundercracker, the final boss, is probably the easiest one, because you fight him at the end of every lane, and he's just very predictable. He's got the highest health of the entire map, so it is a long fight with a bot like Tronus, but he's not difficult. I think in 7 times I might have died once just because I was tired. So that's a pretty easy fight. And so I would recommend, of course, Tronus. I would say certainly any healing bots have a lot of currency. You could bring Wheeljack to the tech lane. There are people that have done OGP and Ratchet on the Tactician lane if you want to be adventurous. Scorp can be good for the Warrior lane. Just bots that heal will help to keep you alive longer. But beyond that, just use whatever bot you have that you play really, really well with. And I would recommend, use those boosts. You've got the tier 1 and 2 damage and health boosts. The tier 2 boosts are great because they last longer. The Rampage boost, you can use that as well. Obviously, equip your relics. And then I would just say, take your time. Take a break every couple of fights because they are long. And so if you try to do a whole lane all at once, you're going to get tired. You're going to start to get worn out. So I would take a break. And then also remember, too, that the longer you're playing the game, the more likely you're going to start to have lag and all of that. So that's what I did. Just play defensively as well, because remember, these bots are super fast. They're going to be able to do things that you can't do. But as long as you play carefully, you're patient, take a break, use those boosts, use those relics. Like I said, if you're even reasonably experienced, you can definitely get through it. And I do think it's worth it. We've got about 5 weeks left in the game now, so I think it's a worthwhile endeavor to go ahead and finish it if you haven't finished it yet. So I'm going to leave it there for now, guys. I am excited. I have completed literally everything in the game. As I said in my last video or a couple of videos ago, I'm going to keep playing a little bit longer. I won't play till the very end, but I got a few more things I want to do, and then I will be ready to move on. So I hope you're well, guys. Do let me know if you have any questions, and we will be in touch again soon.